As we head into the international break and we see a slight pause in the MLS season, minus the 3 games that will be played this weekend, I thought this would be a good time for another edition of Quickfire News. I have 5 stories to go over today where I'm not only going to explain what's going on, but also give you my thoughts and opinions. We'll discuss the fate of the USMNT as they head into the last round of World Cup qualifying, how MLS teams are progressing in the CCL, and we'll also take a look into the new MLS Second Division that is commencing play this weekend. All that and more in this edition of Quickfire News. We'll start off talking through our MLS news, and the first topic I want to cover is how MLS is doing in this year's CONCACAF Champions League. Now, if you're not familiar with the CCL, it's a continental competition between North and Central American teams that MLS has never won before. Every single year, a team from Mexico wins this competition. But just a week ago, it looked like we might have been able to get an all-MLS Final Four. After the first set of legs, Seattle was 3-0 up against Liga MX side León, the New England Revolution were 3-0 up against Liga MX side Pumas, and NYCFC were 3-1 up against Guatemalan side Comunicaciones. Along with that, CF Montreal got away with only a 1-0 loss down in Mexico against Cruz Azul. It really seemed that at least 3 of those 4 teams would advance, and we were all just hoping Montreal would be able to pull through in their home leg. Well, Montreal got knocked out. NYCFC almost gave away their lead in Guatemala, but the biggest surprise of all, the Revolution threw away their 3-0 advantage, went to penalties, and were knocked out by Pumas. This is exactly why it's so hard to feel confident for an MLS side, even if they blow the other team out of the water in the first leg. When MLS heads down to Mexico, it's usually game over. Yes, there's the altitude and maybe a more hostile environment, but honestly, it's just that these MLS sides never have a mentality to win. Even with such an experienced coach like Bruce Arena, these massive comebacks are still a possibility. In a pre-game press conference, Arena stated that we aren't the ones who have to score, they are. And then he proceeded to put out a game plan of sitting back and trying to absorb pressure for a whole 90 minutes. In Mexico against a very strong Puma side, and it's just straight up disrespectful for him to expect anything different was gonna happen. Since 2018, MLS sides playing in Mexico have a record of 3 wins, 15 losses, and 3 draws. Now the good thing is that Seattle was able to pull through a second leg draw against León and have set up an all MLS semifinal on one side of the bracket, while there is an all Liga MX side on the other. So for the 6th time since the CCL became the CCL, there will be an MLS team in the final, and it couldn't have set up any better to finally break the curse against a Mexican team in the final. In my pre-tournament predictions, I had Seattle meeting Cruz Azul in the final, and I still believe that's going to happen. So will this be the year for MLS, or will Liga MX come out on top once again? Sticking with our MLS theme we got going, I want to discuss the recent trade rumors coming out of Columbus involving Gyasi Zardes. About a week ago, esteemed journalist Tom Bogert released an article stating that the Columbus Crew were open to trading out Gyasi Zardes. Now since then, Crew head coach Caleb Porter has come out saying that he has no clue where the article came from and that it's not true, but there are reasons to suspect it could happen. Last season, Zardes ended the campaign with 9 goals and 0 assists in around 1,600 minutes. That averages a goal contribution about every 177 minutes or once every 2 games. His backup and the Crew's 2020 Super Draft pick, Miguel Berry, ended his first season in Columbus with 8 goals and 2 assists and about half of the minutes Zardes had. If you're curious about the math, that's a goal contribution about every 84 minutes. There is suspicion based on these stats that maybe Zardes' time as a starter is coming to an end in Columbus. During the offseason, Porter stated that both strikers will be competing for game time, and so far after 4 games this year, Miguel Berry has started every single one, leaving Zardes on the bench for late game appearances. It seems the lack in game time has also convinced USMNT coach Greg Berhalter to omit Zardes from this last round of World Cup qualifying games. So having a DP on your bench taking up cap space does give you a good reason to maybe unload him for something in return, but I'm not sure that's in the best interest of the crew. Now, as a crew fan, I really like Zardes and Barry, but after the injury crisis we suffered in 2021, I really don't want to see us lose one of our club's top goal scorers unless we have a plan in place. Along with that, I actually don't think that Barry should even be starting over Zardes, at least at the moment. Barry picked up a goal in the first game of the season, but since then I haven't seen much that warrants him being a pinned-on starter. I think Barry finds success coming into games against tired legs, and I think our attack actually flows better with Zardes on the field, whether he's actually scoring those chances or just being a presence. Yes, he did just pull off an absolutely incredible miss in the crew's last match, but that was more than we saw from Barry in the first 60 minutes. I think there are teams that should be ready to pounce on this Zardes trade if they can pull it off, but right now I really want to see Zardes stay in Columbus, at least for the remainder of the season. The United States' men's national team is back in action for the final window of World Cup qualifying, and is it bad that I'm really nervous about what's going to happen in this coming week? The fact that there's a possibility, albeit a very small one, that in 1 week from now the USMNT may not qualify for the World Cup absolutely terrifies me. After living through the last World Cup cycle and that loss to Trinidad, I think I got trust issues with this squad. And what doesn't help either is the fact that we don't have our best player, Weston McKennie, who is out because of injury, as well as Dest and Brendan Aronson. Now, I know this USMNT squad should still be levels above the other teams we're playing, but that hasn't stopped us from failing before. Currently, the US sits in second place, tied with Mexico on 21 points, and under them in the playoff spot is Panama on 17. In this window, the USMNT will travel to the Azteca to play Mexico, face Panama at home, and end it off in Costa Rica. For the United States to guarantee qualification, they only need 5 points, and even with 4 points, they still have a very high chance to qualify. The debate going on right now is that should the USMNT play a rotated squad in Mexico to save the starters for the more vital games in Panama and Costa Rica, or should they fight for the 3 points at the Azteca? Personally, I mean, we've seen a backup US side beat Mexico recently, so I think we can at least get a point there, but I mean, it's going to be extremely difficult. I'd probably say it's best to save the starters for Panama and Costa Rica, but I mean, it's still a big risk. We lost to Panama away from home earlier in qualification, and they have a real good chance to either make a playoff spot or automatically qualify. So they're gonna come out strong when we face them. And for Costa Rica, I mean, we almost threw the game against them at home when we went down in the first minute. So I'm not 100% confident we'll be able to get 3 points away. If the US does not qualify, get ready for an absolute falling apart of the USMNT fan base, and honestly, the USMNT Twitter. Even if we do qualify, I'm sure the fans will still have stuff to complain about. Going back into club football talk, this week marked the return of the US Open Cup after a multi-year postponement due to the pandemic. For those who don't know, the US Open Cup is the oldest ongoing national soccer competition in the United States. It dates all the way back to 1913. You can kind of think of it like an FA Cup in England, where teams from all around the country at all levels are able to enter a chance to be the champions. This is the only competitive competition where we see MLS clubs come up against lower division opponents. This week, the first round of the competition kicks off, where open division teams will begin play. In the second round, Division 2 and 3 teams will join in, and in the third round, we start to see some MLS teams enter the competition. When it's all said and done, the winner of this tournament earns a berth into the CONCACAF Champions League, so there's technically a lot to play for here. Although the US Open Cup doesn't really get the attention I think it deserves, it's a great place to see some Cinderella runs and some David vs. Goliath matchups. The final round of 32 won't begin until May 10th, but the story of the 2022 edition has begun. And finally, we're going to wrap up this video talking about another competition that will be starting this weekend. MLS Next Pro, a new second division of MLS, will begin its inaugural campaign on Friday when St. Louis City takes on Rochester, New York FC. If you want to know all the info about this new league, check out my video on it by clicking the I button above, because I'm not really going to focus too much on the league itself for this story. but instead, I want to talk about one of the rules in place for this competition. Now, MLS and American soccer, for that matter, has been a test site for possible new rules that could be put into place for world football. We saw that when VAR was first introduced in the United States before being used over in Europe. This time, we're seeing a new rule being used in MLS Next Pro, which is that there will be no ties after a game. Instead, if a game is tied after regulation, teams will each earn 1 point, but a winner will be decided by a penalty shootout. The winner of the shootout will be awarded an additional point. So if a game ends in a draw, one team could earn 2 points from that match. The reason for this is that according to the league, approximately 25% of MLS games have resulted in ties in the last 3 years, and 20% of men's FIFA World Cup knockout games since 1998 have been decided by shootouts. They say that this new rule will be an exciting element for fans and will provide crucial opportunities for players to sharpen their finishing in this critical element of the competition. So feel free to let me know what you think about MLS Next Pro testing out this new no tie rule. And that's all the stories I have to cover in this episode of Quickfire News. So please, please, please let the USMNT qualify for the next World Cup. I'll see you guys next time, and thanks for watching.